This is Music 307, our video for South Asia. In this video, we'll be covering India, both North and South Indian music, as well as Bangladesh and Pakistan. This is a map of South Asia, which shows the location of the various countries. As you can see, in the middle you have India. To the right you have Bangladesh. To the left, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and below India, the island of Sri Lanka. There are 1.4 billion people in India. It's the second most populous country in the world, probably soon to be the most populous sometime in the next decade. There's a lot of ethnic, linguistic, and religious diversity in India. This is important, especially the religious diversity will play a big part in the music that we're going to be talking about. It was a British colony. The official language is English, and there's still a strong British colonial influence. And it's one of the oldest musical traditions in the world, going back 4,000 years. In the photo, you see India's famed Taj Mahal. So first, we will start with Hindustani Raga from the north. The major cities in northern India are Mumbai, which used to be known as Bombay, New Delhi, the capital, and North India, or India, became independent from the British in 1947. The major figure in the independence of India was Mahatma Gandhi, who lived until 1948 and proposed the ideas of nonviolent resistance in order to gain freedom. Not only was he influential in the freedom of North India, but also the Republic of South Africa, where he spent time, and he was a tremendous influence on the philosophies of Martin Luther King in this country and the civil rights movement here. India is the world's largest democracy. It has an ancient caste system that dictates the different classes, but there is a rising middle class, yet there's still a lot of disparity in wealth. And as I said before, there's a lot of variety and a lot of pluralism in the different religious beliefs. So first we are going to listen to a Hindustani Raga from the north, and you'll note sort of a dreamy quality to this music and a drum which enters later on, which has many different timbres. In the photo, you will see the instruments being played. To the left, the tabla. In the middle, a drone instrument, the tambura. And to the right, the sarod, a fretless string instrument that provides the melody. So the melody is provided with the instrument in the right, the rhythm by the tabla in the left, and the drone instrument with 4 strings in the middle is playing is a tambura. So in that piece, you heard the tambura in the background. It's a fretless plucked lute. It's got 4 strings and it provides the background, the pillar, the drone in the background. Um, and it's often tuned in a 5-8-8-1 or a so do 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 kind of pitch. So it'd be so do 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 in the last piece. And it provides, some people say it, the sound of it even sort of suggests incense. It's played in most groups by a student or sometimes a vocalist. The name for a student in Indian music is shishya. You also heard the melodic instrument, the sarod, which is a fretless plucked lute. So it has no frets. It has a smooth metallic, what would normally be a fretboard, and 3 sets of strings, melodic strings, drone strings, and sympathetic strings underneath. And we'll talk more about sympathetic strings in a few seconds. It has a calfskin resonator face, and it has sort of a little bit of a twangy, buzzy sound, and it also utilizes the metallic fretboard or the metallic board to slide between notes. Here's a better view of what sympathetic strings look like on the most famous North Indian lute, the sitar. So on top, it's difficult to see, but there are 7 main strings that are plucked, 4 melodic strings and 3 rhythmic strings. And underneath, there's 12 strings that are never touched or that are not usually touched, and they just vibrate as the instrument is being played. So these are called sympathetic strings. Think of a piano. If you don't have the sustain pedal on and you hit a note, all you hear is that note. But if you press down on the sustain pedal and release all the strings so that they can vibrate, and you hit that same note, you hear a reverberation of all the strings that are sympathetically vibrating with the note that you're hitting. And that's similar to the sound you get on the sitar. One other thing I should mention about these instruments, if you look at the photo of the sitar, that the rectangular largest white thing is the bridge. And it's different than the bridge you find on Western guitars, because on Western guitars, the bridge comes to a point against a string. And on sitars and sarods, the bridge is in more contact with the string. So it buzzes, the string buzzes against that bridge. And that's an important part of the sound. And a lot of people think that that sound, that buzzy sound, helps to get you into a more spiritual state or an altered state of consciousness. I like to say that the buzz gets you buzzed. So in Indian music, the scale system is known as raga. Raga, very important term. Normally it's 7 pitches, similar to our Western scale. There are 500 common ragas in use, though. So compare that to what we have in the West, which is for the most part major and minor. In India, you have 500 different types of scales, not just 2. Raga means atmosphere, and it provides the framework for improvisation and composition. It's a lot more complicated than a scale, because each raga not only has a set of notes, but ornaments that are commonly played with them, and those are prescribed, as well as melodic patterns that are played within each raga, and a hierarchy of pitches, similar to our hierarchy in that, do is the most important note typically, and sol and fa are the important sub notes. But it's more complex than that. Actually, in an Indian raga, the scale isn't just do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. There might be a certain prescribed way of going up that scale. So it might be something like do, re, fa, mi, la, sol, ti, do. And it might come down in a completely different way, like do, ti, la, sol, fa, sol, mi, re, do. So these prescribed ways of playing the scale with all the ornaments and the hierarchy and melodic patterns lead to a kind of a mood. And each one of these ragas are associated with times of days or certain feelings like love or anger. Some ragas are known to have magic, known to melt stones. Some ragas are for devotion. There's one raga that I'm aware of that the time of day that it's played is at around 5 a.m. when two lovers who've been sleeping together all night leave to go to their respective homes. That's how specific these ragas are, these scales. There is 36,000 potential ragas, of which only 500 are commonly in use. I would ask you right now to pause this and look up Wikipedia and look up ragas, and you'll be blown away by the number of ragas that they list there. What that does is it provides Indian music with so many more possibilities for color and for the background of the music and for melodic improvisation. Think of how in the West we have major and minor, and that's like painting a picture in black and white versus having these 500 to 36,000 different colors that you can use to paint music. That's how sophisticated it is. So at the beginning of this performance, which I hope you listen to many times, you will hear what's called an alap, and that's an unmetered improvisation at the beginning by the melodic instrument. In this case, the sarod, but you'll also be watching a video that has sitar. So it's in a free rhythm, and it's the opportunity for the melodic improviser to play around with the raga, to explore the notes. And it usually starts off with the low do, and it starts rising through the scale, stopping on the pitches, which are the most important, and playing those ornaments, which are specific and typical to that particular raga. And as you go along, the rhythmic density gets a little bit more increased, so there's more notes, and finally you will hear a gat. Dun, 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 is the one that you heard in the piece that is your listening example. That gat is sort of like the hook or the riff that is sort of the centerpiece for this piece. So you'll hear the sarod or the sitar keep coming back to that in between improvising and leaving space for the tabla, the other musicians, to also improvise. So you will hear the gat played twice in our recording, and at the end of the second time the gat is played, you'll hear the tabla enter. And at that point, the piece continues to rise in range and increasingly get more rhythmically complex. So a little bit on the tabla. It is a pair of hand drums. The smaller drum is called the tabla and it's tuned to the central pitch. The larger drum is called the baya. And there is a language of syllables that goes along with everything that can be done with these tabla drums. And there's quite a bit of sounds that come out of each one of these drums. Put all together, these syllables create the teka or rhythmic patterns. There's about 300 different tala that are commonly in use. These are the rhythmic patterns, the meters, you might say, that accompany the music. At the end of this video, I will have a video for you to watch that demonstrates how complex these rhythmic syllables are. This is how you learn music. Even if you don't have instruments in front of you, you can learn the rhythms just by memorizing the syllables and the patterns that go along with them. The rhythmic system in Indian music is called tala. It's a rhythmic cycle. It's similar to what we would call meter, but the rhythms and the meters are much more complex. Some cycles are 10 beats of 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2, or 16 beats rather than simple duple or triple. the drummer in the audience actually clap along normally with the piece, and the drummer stretches the beat or improvises as he goes along and tries to play it with the downbeat, what we would call the main downbeat, the first beat, by improvising and doing wild improvisations and somehow still ending up on the main beat. So if you were to recite this with me on the first, where you see the X and the 2 and the 3, I want you to clap like a normal clap with the right hand down onto the right palm down onto the left palm. On the third one where you see the circle, I want you to turn your hand around so that the back of your right hand is clapping down onto your left palm. So let's try this together 2 times, and you'll hear me clapping in the background, and the main claps, the first, second, and fourth will sound like this, and the third one will sound like this. It's just a soft one. So here we go. Ready, go. Da, din, din, da. Da, din, din, da. Da, tin, tin, ta. Ta, din, din, da. Da, din, din, da. Da, din, din, da. Da, tin, tin, ta. Ta, din, din, da. That is the 16-beat cycle called tintal, one of the most common. Cultural considerations. Indian classical music, and what we are talking about right now is classical music, a classical tradition that goes back 3,000 to 4,000 years. Now understand, just like any country, there's pop music, there's classical music, and there's folk music. There's the music that people play in villages and in their homes that goes back probably even longer than 4,000 years. And then there is a classical tradition that we are setting right now that originated in royalty courts, urban centers, where the rise of professional musicians with theory being taught by masters to students and in a formal kind of way, and the music performed in formal concert halls or formal spaces designed for music. Very similar to how we go about with our Western classical tradition. The tradition, though, is an oral tradition. It's called the Guru Shishya Parampara. And this is a master-student teaching model, different than in the West. Here, you music majors study with your teacher maybe an hour or half an hour a week. In India, if you were accepted by a master, you will pack your bags and you will go live with them, normally for 5 to 10 years. And you will do everything for that master. You will carry their instruments, you will do chores around their house, you will cook for them, you will accompany them on trips, you will help them backstage get dressed and tune their instrument and prepare for a concert. And you will also be learning the musical things that go along with it. But as you can see, the cultural parts of being a musician are front-loaded into this tradition. Occasionally, the master will wake you up in the middle of the night and say, practice this, and you will get a lesson at these odd times. At least that's what I've always been told. But really, in the meantime, you're going to be learning not necessarily the notes and the pieces, but everything else that goes along with being a professional musician. And I put those numbers 10, 20, and 30 there because that is something that's stuck in my mind from the most famous Indian musician, Ravi Shankar. He said, it takes 30 years to become a master musician. For the first 10 years, by the end of the first 10 years, you're pleasing yourself. Then in 20 years, you're pleasing your teacher. After 30 years, you're pleasing God. That's how he approaches it, and that's how a lot of Indian musicians approach this practice and this devotion of becoming a classical musician. The word rasa, or mood, translates sort of as aesthetics as it relates to the art. And actually, the ragas, or the scales that we talked about earlier, can be depicted in paintings called Ragamala. So the painting you see in this slide is actually a depiction of what one of the scales looks like, sounds like. And some of the things you probably already know about Indian music is that it's had a lot of popularity in the West. And probably the most familiar and famous of all these musicians was Ravi Shankar, who died in 2012, I think it was. And Ravi Shankar came to prominence with his association with the Beatles in 1966, 67, and especially with the Beatle George Harrison, who got all the Beatles to go from England to live in India for a little while. You will hear sitar in several Beatles songs. Within You, Without You from the Sgt. Pepper's album, Norwegian Wood also, and Ravi Shankar has a very famous daughter who carries on in his tradition. Her name is Anushka Shankar. Actually, you probably all know Ravi Shankar's other daughter, Norah Jones, the famous pop singer. And Ravi Shankar's most important collaborator was Ustad Al Raga. He was a tabla player who you will see in the video Monterey Pop when you watch it at the end of this video. There's a link to it. He was possibly the most famous tabla player ever, and his son, Zakir Hussain, is probably the most famous living musician or living Indian percussionist today. Very popular, very famous percussionist. Now our second listening example also comes from India, but it is more of a devotional religious hymn. And what you will hear in this will remind you of congregational worship with call and response vocals. It's in duple meter, and in addition to the singing, you will hear a tabla and a harmonium. A harmonium is sort of like an organ type of instrument. Note how these instruments are tuned to perfect intervals, so they melt in your ears. They're different than Western keyboards, which are tuned equal temperament, so no one key is really in tune. That's what makes these harmoniums so beautiful and so wonderful to listen to. So there is a video, a photo of the harmonium right there. And let's listen to a little bit of this devotional hymn. So cultural considerations for this listening example. These bhajans are devotional Hindu songs. They're sung in temples, and the example right there, photos you will see worshippers in one of these temples. Now let's go to South India, where some of the major cities you might have heard about are Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Madras. So we spoke about North Indian culture as being titled Hindustani. In the South, we call the music and the culture Carnatic. Carnatic. And it's older, more ancient, and pure. It's predominantly Hindu, whereas the north, there's quite a bit of Islamic influence. In the photo, you see a snake charmer playing a double reed instrument. So our first impressions for the Carnatic classical song, again, you might notice the drone in the background, that aural incense, and a highly melismatic singer with a violin imitating him. So the melody is provided by the vocalist with imitation by a Western violin, and the rhythm is provided by a two-headed drum called the mridangam, and the drone is provided not by a tambura in this example, but by a box, sort of similar to a small accordion that provides the one and the five, the sol, the do and the sol. That is called a shruti box. I would suggest, if you want to learn more about that instrument, that you just quickly pause the video and open up the video by Kalani Das, showing what a shruti box is. Also, a little note about the violin, which became very popular in India starting in the 17 and 1800s, I believe. It's been around there for a long time. And in classical Indian music, it replaced some of the folk violins that were being used before then. So it has been around for a long time. And here's a photo of the violin and the mridangam, and here is this listening example from South India.
दिखदरियाद काटू दिखदरियाद काटू दिखदरियाद काटू दिखदरियाद काटू दिखदरियाद काटू दिखदरियाद काटू.
So what you just heard had some similarities to the Hindustani raga. It started off with melodic improvisation, exploring the raga, and then you heard a main tune, a gat, come in twice before the drum came in, and after that the piece continued to get even more rhythmically dense and more melodically dense. So this kind of piece is called kriti. It's Hindu devotional poetry set to music, and there's a skeletal melody with which is a basis for improvisation and ornamentation. So in southern India, the raga and tala systems are even more complex than in northern India, with some 36,000 possible ragas and 175 to 300 variations of tala, or different kinds of meters that are used. One of the most famous composers and prolific composers in the South was Sri Tyagaraja, and he was a devotee of one of the Hindu gods, well-known gods, Rama. And this is the kind of music that is played at Ararana festivals, which are religious festivals, and there is a portrait of Sri Tyagaraja. So, to summarize the differences between North and Southern Indian music, the Northern tradition is called Hindustani. It is more often instrumental, more often improvised. It is influenced by Islam, so the music is more meditative. It uses instruments like the sitar, sarod, and tabla drums. The drone is provided by the tambura. The Southern tradition is known as the Carnatic tradition. It's more often vocal, more often composed, and less improvised. And it is more influenced by the older Hindu religion. So the music tends to be more ecstatic with more changes in mood. Common instruments are the violin, the mridangam drums, and in both Hindustani and Carnatic traditions, the tambura can act as the drone instrument. Connections to the West, there are many. As I've already alluded to, Ravi Shankar in the photo there was looked up to by George Harrison, who became one of his musical disciples. And not only Harrison, but also the jazz musician John Coltrane wrote a piece called India in his album Impressions. The Grateful Dead, especially the drummer of the Grateful Dead, was very influenced by the Indian music, and the jazz guitarist John McLaughlin. There's also been some collaborations with classical musicians, most notably the violinist Yehudi Menuhin, who did an album with Ravi Shankar called East Meets West. And you hear samples of Indian music from many, many artists. Missy Elliott, DJ Shadow, Zach De La Rocha, Kanye West are just a few of the Western musicians, pop musicians that have sampled Indian music for some of their pop tunes. Also, I don't want to fail to mention the importance of movies. India produces twice as many movies as Hollywood, and hopefully you've seen some of them. Slumdog Millionaire a few years ago won the Oscar, or won some Oscars, and the musicians that perform and sing in these movies are quite prolific. The two of the best known ones are Lata Mangeshkar and Asha Bhosle, both of whom are recognized in several books as the most recorded musicians on the planet. We're talking about, I can't remember how many thousands and thousands of recordings, 10 to 15,000 recordings that each one of them have done. And I provided a link to a short video of Lata Mangeshkar, who's one of my favorite singers on the planet. Her voice just makes me cry when I hear it. And even as an older woman of, I can't remember how old she was when she recorded the video that I'm going to play for you. I think she was in her 60s or 70s. She is still regarded as a great singer because her voice sounds like that of a young girl. And so both she and Asha Bhosle were the singers that were called upon to basically do the voiceovers in all these thousands of Bollywood movies to represent that signature of the heroine and her voice, the voice of youth and beauty. Moving on to Bangladesh and a Baul song. So Bangladesh was formerly Eastern Pakistan. It became independent in 1971. It is a predominantly Muslim country with frequent flooding, and most of the country is near sea level. The song we are going to listen to is a Baul song, and first impressions is you will hear this sort of jingly instrument that sounds like a sleigh bell with a very assertive vocal and a bouncy melodic instrument. The instrument that you're hearing that is the bouncy melodic instrument is called the gobiantro, and there is a photo of a gobiantro and a Baul musician there.
ঘরে জুড়ি দি থাকবো কতদিন, ভাঙা ঘরে জুড়ি দি থাকবো কতদিন। যেদিন আসবি বর্ষা করবি ফর্সা, যেদিন আসবি বর্ষা করবি ফর্সা, রাখবি না তুই কোনোই চিন, ভাঙা ঘরে জুড়ি দি থাকবো কতদিন, ভাঙা ঘরে জুড়ি দি থাকবো কতদিন। এই ঘরে নাই একটি অঝাটি, হিংসারুই পোকাতে করেছে মাটি।
The Bauls constitute a cultural group. They're itinerant musicians and they have a non-mainstream spirituality. The songs often include social commentary, and one of India's most famous poets, Tagore, was a Baul. One last area that I want to cover that isn't in your textbook but is very important for you to know about. I have included some music from Pakistan, and this is Qawwali music. Qawwali is performed by Muslims of the Sufi sect, and this music is meant to bring listeners closer to God. It uses poetry, and sometimes people refer to this music as Islamic gospel. The most famous singer was Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who died in 1997. He collaborated with a lot of Western musicians, and most notably Peter Gabriel, and he was a highly influential singer. When you listen to this music, and I hope you do at the end of this video, please turn it up, try to get into it, and sort of enjoy it. It's very, very exciting music to hear live as well if you ever have the opportunity to hear it. Just a little note on religion. Every religion has a conservative and a more liberal base to it. So in a lot of conservative religious circles, be it Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, they warn against the power of instruments and music. And in a lot of congregations in all these religions, the music might tend to be more vocal and more hymn-like and have less instruments. But within every religion, there's flexibility. And even though I talk about how in Islam, there's a tendency for Islam to sort of mute the ecstatic quality of some of the music that we've heard, there's always exceptions. And this is an exception. Qawwali music is highly exciting, highly ecstatic, and it is thought by members of the Sufi sect that music is the path toward getting closer to God. So we will talk about another style of Sufi music when we get to Middle East as well. In closing, I've put links to several videos here that I really, really urge you to watch. All of them will come up in some kind of way on the exam. But this is the kind of music that you really have to spend some time listening to really appreciate. So the most important of these is Ravi Shankar and Ala Ustad Radka at Monterey Pop. I hope you enjoy this as much as I've enjoyed watching this all through the years, especially checking out the important people in the audience at this important festival in 1967. Monterey Pop featured The Who, Jimi Hendrix, who you'll see in the audience, the Mamas and the Papas, you'll see Mama Cass in the audience, as well as a number of other important groups and acts. It was the last concert that a number of important musicians performed at. And the performance by Ravi Shankar and Ala Ustad Radka is really just timeless. This is classical music from northern India. And I must say that a lot of us, our Western classical music tends to be serious, and the audience is supposed to be quiet. And, there's a seriousness to it. But classical music in other countries, particularly this example in northern India, you'll notice how much interaction there is between the performers and how much fun they're having, laughing at certain things and certain rhythms that they're playing and um, trying to copy each other. It's really just a lovely video to watch, and I hope you enjoy it. There's a short conical video. This is sort of known as Indian scat singing, and I spoke earlier about the different rhythmic syllables, also known as bowls, that you find in Indian music that are used to teach rhythms. This is a great example of those rhythmic syllables. It's quite virtuosic. Also, I mentioned Lata Mangeshkar, who has just the most amazing youngish sounding voice. The video I'm providing for you is from a BBC session. She is still alive, and she has just a beautiful, beautiful voice that makes me want to cry. Finally, I hope you watch the entire Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan video that I provided here from a concert he did in Pakistan before his death. I think it was right before his death. The whole thing is worth watching from beginning to end. I think it's only 15 minutes, but you will be amazed at this man's voice. And as I said before, he's possibly one of the most important and famous world music singers of all time. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you very much for watching.
Takita taka taka dida taka dida tadik kita taka dum tading ta kita kerta kita takita kita kerta kita kita taka dida takita takita taka taka dida takita 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 kita ta kita ta takita kita kerta 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 kita kita kejenda tak kedipi 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 kejenda tak kedi
जो वादा किया इल्जाम लेंगे, तुम्हें दिल दिया है, तुम्हें जा भी देंगे। जब इश्क का सौदा किया फिर क्या घबराना, हमको आना पड़ेगा। जो वादा किया वो निभाना पड़ेगा, निभाना पड़ेगा। चमकते हैं जब तक ये चांद और तारे, न टूटेंगे अब अहदों पैमान हमारे। एक दूसरा जब दे सदा हो के दीवाना, हमको आना पड़ेगा। जो वादा किया वो निभाना पड़ेगा। रोके ज़माना चाहे रोके खुदाई, तुमको आना पड़ेगा। जो वादा किया वो निभाना पड़ेगा, निभाना पड़ेगा।
आजा परदेसिया वास्ता ही प्यार दा ਤੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਨੇ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਲ ਵੇ ਤੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਨੇ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਲ ਵੇ ਤੇਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਨੇ ਗਲੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਲ ਵੇ ਗੁੰਮਸੁੰਮ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਾ ਕਰਨੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਵੇ